My friends, who is my neighbor? That man in today's gospel who posed that question had a problem. He wanted to take the Bible seriously. He wanted to inherit eternal life. The passage said, so he most wanted to go to heaven. So Jesus reminded him that the path to that goal was to love God with his whole being and to love his neighbor as himself. Apparently, he had no problem about loving God. But the part about loving his neighbor, that was disturbing to the man. Who is my neighbor? The man asked. This law was given to the Jews, so obviously it referred to all of them. But according to the logic of the man who asked the question, this commandment could not possibly apply to every Jew. Some of them were simply not worth loving. Take Zacchaeus, for example. He was a betrayer of his own people. He collected taxes for the Romans. And what about prostitutes? They were the blight of society. Honorable people would have nothing to do with them. You see the man's dilemma. The man in the gospel was struggling with the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus gave him no answer. He simply told a story. And the point of the story was that the man had to answer his own question. And so do you and me. A neighbor is a choice. First of all, no one can compel us or anyone to be a neighbor to another person. The man in the story obviously had some people in mind that he really didn't like. God himself could not force the man to be a neighbor if he was unwilling to do so. I heard about two men who lived right next door to each other. Their houses were no more than 30 feet apart. In a geographical sense, they were neighbors. But these two had never ever spoken a word to the other. Circumstances in life put them in proximity to one another. But they chose not to be a neighbor to the other. On the other hand, no one can prevent a person from being a neighbor if they choose to be a neighbor. Now, the Samaritan in our story was a neighbor for one reason and one reason only. He made up his mind to do so and not to let anything stand in his way. Now, fear might have stopped him. He could have told himself that he was just too busy to help the victim. Stinginess might have stopped him. So why would anyone want to get involved? Ultimately, the Samaritan refused to use any of those excuses, and he chose to get involved and made up his mind to be a neighbor. He would not let anything stand in his way. You know, that's the nice thing about being a neighbor. When we choose to do it, no one or nothing can stand in our way. I remember hearing about a lawyer who worked in a high-rise tower in New York City. At the front entrance was a newsstand where he would make small purchases every morning. The owner of the newsstand was an ill-tempered, impatient person. He would say things to his customers like, well, make up your mind, I don't have all day. Occasionally he would say, is that the smallest bill you got? I'm not running a bank here, you know. Well, one day a friend asked the lawyer if that man was always so rude. And he said, yes, he was. Well, then, why are you so nice to him all the time? The man asked the lawyer. The lawyer replied, I made up my mind a long time ago not to let him decide how I was going to act. I remember a little poem. It goes like this. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. Who is my neighbor? That is up to you and to me. If you are unwilling to be a neighbor, not even God himself can make you do it. But if you choose to be a neighbor, no one can stop you. The choice is ours.